service, and but as a pastor, I'm supposed to be apt to teach. And there's another series that's going to be coming that's going to take a huge chunk of 2024, but we're not there yet. And as I was praying and looking and studying and looking at sermons and different things, it dawned on me that we are 7 weeks and 4 days from our winter revival. And if you look on the behind me while we've been here, we're actually 7 weeks, 3 days, 15 hours, 53 minutes, and 36 seconds from January 21st, 10:45 a.m. That's when we're officially kicking off our winter revival. And I thought, what better thing to do on Wednesday night for the next 7 weeks than to look at revival. I've been to a lot of churches in my life. I've been to a lot of meetings. I've been to a lot of revivals. I've been to a lot of conferences as a pastor's kid. By the time I was 13, I'd probably log more hours in church than most 50-year-olds. I mean, we were always in church. And went to a lot of revival. I really realized what revival is. You know, we think of revival as a group of meetings. That's what it is. It's a planned group of meetings. But that is Bible. If you look in the Old Testament at the revivals that we see in the Old Testament, we're going to over the next few weeks. If you look at the revivals that we've had since Bible times, what we call those are revivals that actually lasted months and years. And they span the entire continent and at times the entire world. So in our mind in 2023, we look at a revival and we think, oh, that's when we get a special preacher to come in and we have special singing and we have extra church for 3 or 4 days or a week if we're really crazy and want to do that. I remember the first revival I ever preached. I went out to Creston Church and Pastor DJ said, we're having a revival. I said, okay, so we start on Sunday and we go all the way through to the next Sunday. And I said, praise the Lord. And he said, I want you to preach every day. So I did. And in fact, I showed up on the last Sunday morning, and he didn't want me to preach that morning. He meant that night. Well, he just let me preach anyway. So I just preached. I wasn't even supposed to preach, and I just kept on preaching. But this evening, we're going to start looking at and starting this countdown to revival. If you look with me in Psalms 85, will be all throughout this over the next 7 weeks. But Psalms 85 and verse 6 says this, wilt thou not revive us again, that thy people may rejoice in thee? I just came from Cheshire Baptist, their revival. That was the theme verse for their revival. That was the theme verse. Wilt thou not revive us again? And I started reading that verse every night every day leading up to, I would read Psalms 85, the entire chapter leading up to that revival that they had me come and preach. And then all that really did was excite me even more for revival that we're going to have here. So we're going to look at and be very practical over the next few weeks. Over the next 7 weeks, in fact, we're going to look at revival. But this evening, we want to just start at the beginning and work our way through. What is revival? I've been to churches, and it's sad to say, I went to one church, and we were talking about our winter revival we had last year with Brother Justin Simmons. And I said, man, we had a great meeting. We had a great revival. And the pastor looked me in the face and he said, we haven't had a revival service here in 10 years. 10 years. I said, you're doing it wrong. I've known this guy a long time, and I just told him. I said, you are failing your congregation. Did he punch me in the face? He probably wanted to, but you know what? He didn't say anything because he knew that I was right. He knew that I was right. That we need to have revival services. We need to have revival. We need to seek a constant state of revival as Christians. But what does that mean? What is revival? I've got some definitions here for us to look at. Revival, according to Webster's, is this: an improvement in the condition or strength of something. An improvement in the condition or the strength of something. Now, if you look at these next three definitions: a return to a state of activity, a renewed attention to spiritual matters and concerns, recovery of life after death. Now, if you're looking at those definitions of revival, the reason that what revival is, it is a calling of Christians to wake out of sleep and to act like Christians again. That's what revival is. And why? That's what revival really is. Revival is not for lost people. Revival is for saved people. Revival is to revive the sleeping saints, not to wake up the dead lost. To revive us, and then we will see lost people saved as a result of the Christians being revived. I love these last two definitions. Robert Coleman said this, and I agree with his definition. He says, revival is the awakening or quickening of God's people to their true and natural purpose. Their true and natural purpose. Remember that when we're looking at what a Christian's true and natural purpose is, it's to serve God, it's to seek God, it's to submit to God, it's to seek the will of God. That is our true and natural state as a Christian. That should be our baseline. But we get away from that. And so revival is an awakening or quickening of God's people to return to that true and natural purpose. Charles Finley said this: the return of the church from her backsliding and the conversion of sinners. Now, I like Finney because Charles Finney included the conversion of sinners. But notice he started with the return of the church from her backsliding and the conversion of sinners. You cannot have the conversion of sinners like you think you will see in revival without the returning of the church from her backsliding. So that's what revival is. We're going to read all through Psalms 85 over the next several weeks, and we're going to look at that phrase in particular. Wilt thou not revive us again, that thy people may rejoice in thee? But before we get to that, I want to look at the three main reasons we need revival. The three main reasons we need revival. By nature. In 25, we see Paul speaking here, and he says this: for we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. For that which I do, I allow not. For what I would, that do I not. But what I hate, that I do. If then I do that which I would not, I consent unto the law that it is good. Now then there is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth, listen, no good thing. Why do we have to have revival? It's because we are sinful people. From the pulpit to the back pew and the parking lot, I don't care if you've been saved for 5 months or 550 years. You are still a sinner at heart. The Holy Spirit moved in, the Holy Spirit saved you, but you still have the sin nature. And so we still must seek a spirit of revival. If Paul, who was the greatest Christian that ever lived, said the things that I would do, I do not, we will be lying to ourselves if we said that we do not fall into sin. Paul, who refused to marry so that he would have more time to devote to the ministry. Paul, who was beaten and shipwrecked, and Paul, who was whipped. Paul, who was literally stoned to death, and then God said, I'm not done with you, and sent him back down from the third heaven. Paul, who did all these things, he said, I am a sinful person. We are too. We need revival because we are sinful people. I was speaking to a man not too long ago, just a couple years ago, and it's hard to believe it's been a couple years, but he was talking to me about the reason that he would not be saved is because Christians were not perfect. That's basically what he told me. He said, Christians, I know Christian people, and they are just not perfect, to which I had to inform the man, Just because you're saved doesn't mean you're perfect. You should strive for, you should aim for, you should seek to be, but you're not. And so then therefore, as Paul said, we do the things that we don't want to do, so we must seek revival. We must seek personal revival. So the way that this revival is going to happen is this. You individually will seek revival. And then if we individually seek revival, our families can then have revival. If our families then are revived, only then will our church be revived. So if you think I'm going to show up and I'm going to sit and I'm going to endure Tyler Hudson's preaching for a few extra nights and then I'm going to go home and I've done my duty, you are hindering revival. Look out. Why are we doing this study on a Wednesday night and not on Sunday morning? You ask yourself that question. If you come up with an answer, you tell Pastor David why we're doing this study on Wednesday night and not on Sunday morning. It is the people that are here on Wednesday night that want revival. It is the people that show up and stand up and come when it's cold and come when it's hard and come when they're tired and come when they've worked all day and come in their muddy work boots and come after they've been out hunting. It is those people that really want revived. And if we cannot be revived in the Wednesday night crowd, we have no hope in hell of having revival any other time. So yes, Wednesday night Bible study is going to get hot. Because we want the fire of revival to start right now. 7 weeks, 3 hours, 3 days, 15 hours, 42 minutes, and 18 seconds. We want it to start right now. We want when Tyler Hudson shows up that he finds a bunch of on-fire Christians that have been revived for weeks. It'll be the easiest preaching he's ever done. Why revival? Why? Because we're sinful people. Why revival? Because of the sinful church. Now, I'm not talking about our church in particular. I'm talking about the church in general. In the United States of America, the church is in a state of disarray and disrepair. In Revelation 3:14 through 20, we just came through Revelation. We just spent all these weeks in Revelation, and now we're right back in Revelation 3. And that the reason we have to come back is because we spoke about it during the study in Revelation, that we are in what is known as the Laodicean church age. This is the state of the church in the world right now. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 14 says this, "And unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, These things saith the Lord, the Amen, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth." You want to know what the church in America does to God? It makes him sick. Why do we need revival? Because of the sinful state of the churches. Because churches are no longer churches. Because we are religious organizations with a lot of functions. A good friend of mine, Kevin Bartlett, on his church's webpage, they started this campaign, I guess, last year. It might have been right after COVID. I don't know. I just happened upon it. And it said, "We're still church." That's their theme. We are still church. Well, why would you have to say that? Well, have you been to churches lately? Because they're not churches anymore. They're concerned with every other thing other than the souls of men. They're concerned with the appearance of how many people show up. They're concerned with being politically correct. The church in the world today is not a place that God would even be welcome sometimes if he showed up. We need revival because we are sinful individuals. But the problem is that we have had no revival for so long in our country that the nuts have taken over the nut house and the sinners have decided what the saints should be doing. And so the churches are nothing more than social organizations that have no God in them. I've stood behind pulpits and people say, I can't remember the last time somebody preached hell from our pulpit. I've stood behind pulpits and I'll say, I can't remember the last time that somebody stomped on my toes. I'll stand behind pulpits and then I'll leave, and it'll always be the little old blue-haired ladies that'll come up and say, thank you for preaching, because we don't get preached to anymore. That's a sad, sorry state of affairs. That's the truth. We need revival because our sinful churches, we're in the Laodicean church age. We are not hot, we are not cold, we are lukewarm, and we're just happy there. You know, I got out some mashed potatoes after Thanksgiving. I warmed them up. Man, I thought they was good. I took a bite and they were lukewarm. They were disgusting. That's what the church in America is to God today. Lukewarm, leftover, nasty mashed potatoes. We are content to sit and wait for God to come back or for us to die in our pews, and we don't care what happens first. We will not go out and reach lost souls because, heaven forbid, we have to do something, or God forbid we make somebody mad. We will sit and bemoan the station that we find ourselves in, but we do absolutely nothing to change it. When churches cannot wait to be more like the world, something is wrong. We need revival because we are sinful people. We need revival because of the sinful state of the church in the world today. And we need revival because we are a sinful nation. Psalms 33 and verse 12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. If you can just take an ink pen right there in your margin and write, not the USA. We would make the folks at Sodom and Gomorrah blush in our country. We need revival because of this. Sinful people have stopped serving God, and the church is now sinful. And because the church has gotten so far away from God, the nation doesn't even know what God looks like. It is the responsibility of the saints of God to set the standard in the church, and for the church to set the standard for the nation, and for the nation to look to the people of God and the church of God for guidance. But when the church of God and the people of God don't know where God is, the nation's going to fall apart. Listen, I hope people that don't come to church watch on Wednesday night so they can understand why we need revival. I mean real revival. I don't mean a meeting where we sit around and talk about how great we are as Baptists. I don't mean a meeting where we sit around and down and talk bad about other denominations. I don't mean a meeting where we just come and we talk about how great we are and how amazing we are and just pat ourselves on the back. I'm talking about the kind of revival where we hit our knees and we cry out to God and we say, God, forgive us for the sins we've committed. God, forgive our churches for the sins in it. God, forgive us for the sins of our nation. That's what revival is. And that's what it looks like. It's a sinful nation in which we live. It's a sinful nation. You can't turn on your television set without being disgusted at where we're at. Whose fault is that? Ours. Hey, the buck stops here. We can sit and bemoan and say it's because of the homosexual movement and the transgender movement. We can sit and say the liberals have torn us apart. We can sit and say that it's rock and roll, it's the sex, it's the drugs. You know whose fault it is that the country's the way it is? The Christians. Because we lost our backbone somewhere back in the 70s and we ain't never found it. And we sat around and we let the devil kick our teeth down our throat, and then we say the devil's whipping us. The devil's whipping us because we let him. We sit around and say, oh, there'll be a great falling away. That doesn't give you the excuse to fall away, Christian. That doesn't give you the excuse to bow your back up and say, I'm just going to do nothing. Listen, we need revival because our nation is falling apart. And you want to know whose fault it is? It's the saints of God that have failed to serve God the way they should. When the world looks at us and we look just like them, why would they want to be like us? Man, I came for Wednesday night. I thought this was going to be good preaching. You better strap in. You got about another 8 weeks of this. You need to bring your friends. You need to bring every lazy Baptist you know. You need to bring every sorry back row sinner that you know. You need to bring them in here, and we need to talk about revival, and we need to find how we're going to get to revival. We need to get in our Bibles. We need to pray, and we need to have not just a meeting, but revival. Boy, this is hard preaching. Woo, I love it. I live for it. I told Candace, I said, I pray to God that I won't have to be so negative all the time. But then God says, open your eyes, dummy, look around. This is a negative time. I'm a wartime pastor because we're at war. And we need some soldiers in our pews that will go out and say, I'm strapping up and I'm fighting too. Our sinful nation is a disgrace to God. We should take in God we trust off of our money. We should stop saying one nation under God in our pledge, because we should stop lying to the world because it's a lie. You think we should do that? Absolutely. Why should we lie? When they want to say one nation under a God, there's only one God. The God that brought this country up from nothing, and the God that protected this country supernaturally when we should have fallen apart. The God that brought us through civil wars and world wars and Vietnam and Korea, and now we have forgotten Him and we're better than Him. We don't need Him anymore. And you better watch out, because God's not going to have our back next time, and we're going to get licked. We're a sinful nation. That's why we need revival. So how do we get it? How do we see it? There's only one place you can go in the Bible, I think, when you want to talk about revival, because it's a simple blueprint. We've talked about it several times. 2 Corinthians 7:14, or 2 Chronicles 7:14. You can probably quote it by heart. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says this, if which are called by shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. How are we going to have revival? How are we going to have revival in 7 weeks, 3 days, 15 hours, 31 minutes, and 57 seconds? Is Brother Tyler Hudson going to show up and pull it out of his backpack? He's young. He probably still has a backpack. He's just coming from Ripley, so he won't pack a suitcase. He'll just drive over here. Is he going to just get some revival dust and shovel it in his pocket, and when he gets here, he's just going to throw revival all over us? No. I've known that boy a long time. I've known him since he was a real boy, teenage boy. And unless he found a revival mine somewhere, he don't have any to bring. Revivals of the past, we're going to look at them during the study, and I'm going to tell you a little secret. Revivals of the past, when they started, there was no evangelist. Sometimes there wasn't even a church. They would just find somebody and say, hey, we need you to come and preach because we've been praying for weeks. God's been doing something in our town. Will you come and preach for us, please? And when the evangelists showed up, they had to step over the people to get to the pulpit to preach because revival was already there. We have it backwards. We're going to get the right preachers, and we're going to get the right singers, and we're going to just shovel some revival in here. That is not what revival is. Listen, I know some good preachers, man. I can bring some in. They're romping, stomping kind of preachers, brother. Justin Simmons, man, he was good, wasn't he? Woo! Tyler, man, you've heard Brother Tyler. He's good. We got some singers coming. I've been talking to singers. They ain't going to sing. They're going to sing. That ain't revival. That's a church service. If you think that the singing and the preaching is going to revive you, you're sorely mistaken. You're sorely mistaken. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says this, how do you get revival? Prayer to God. If my people, which are called by my name, will what? Humble themselves and pray. 7 weeks, 3 days, 15 hours, 29 minutes, and 35 seconds. How much of that are you going to spend in prayer? How much of that have you spent in prayer this week? Listen, we don't have revival because Christians don't pray. We're too busy. We're too busy doing church stuff. You notice that? Too busy doing busy work. When I was in college, I hated busy work. I'd be like, man, just give me the test. But in churches, Christians, we're real good at being busy doing busy work. But when it comes to the prayer stuff, we'll leave that for somebody else. We'll leave that for the older folks that can't come and help do stuff. You know, they're prayer warriors. Let me ask you something. When did it become okay for every Christian to not be a prayer warrior? I want to know. I want to know at what point in time that we got together and decided as Christians that it's just the older folks' job to pray. Because that's what most churches will say. You ever notice that? You go to churches and they'll say something like, oh, you know, I've heard pastors say this. I think it's an insult. Our senior saints, they're prayer warriors. Why aren't your junior saints prayer warriors? Why aren't your teenage saints prayer warriors? When did it become okay to not pray and then expect God to dump buckets of blessing on our head anyway? Listen, we're not going to have revival unless there's prayer to God. Humble themselves and pray. I mean prayer like you've never prayed before. I mean prayer when it's inconvenient. I mean pray so long that the dinner burns and you don't mind because you're still praying. I mean pray and pray so long that you don't even know what time it is. When's the last time you prayed that hard? When's the last time you got in your prayer closet and you shut the door, it's completely dark, it was you and God, and you wandered out of there and you didn't even know what time it was? How long? When's the last time that your knees buckled because you've been on them so long praying? I remember up at Grace Baptist, we had 24 hours of prayer before revival one time. And we went upstairs in the Sunday school room, had to go upstairs, and there was a literal closet, and they cleared it out. And you'd go and you'd wait your turn, and as soon as that person got up and came out, you'd go in and you'd pray for an hour or two. And there was an older fella, I don't know how he made it up the stairs, but he made it up the stairs and he went in the prayer closet. I remember when we got home and Candace was crying, she said, I watched him, she said he couldn't even get up. She said he couldn't even get up. He was on his face praying. When was the last time you did that? That's what humbling yourself looks like. And then this gentleman, as she went to help him up, he said, oh, no, you got to keep praying because we can't quit praying. It was just like a minute between prayer partners. He wouldn't let her get up because he wanted the prayer chain to keep going. When's the last time you did that? Listen, we want revival or do we want a meeting? I'm sick of meetings. I'm going to be honest. I'm sick of them. Sick of meetings. Been to so many in my lifetime, I'm just tired of them. Tired of them. I'm tired of the same formula and expecting a different result from the same formula. And sanity is this, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Who wants actual revival and not just a meeting? Who wants to press forward and long after Tyler has left and after the sermons have been preached and the singers have sang, we're still having revival and we're not just having a meeting? You see, it starts with prayer. Humble yourselves and pray. I don't get down on my knees and pray. Prideful, arrogant Christian, get down on your knees and pray. That's what I think. Would you stand up before a thrice holy God with your pride and look him in the face? I don't think we should on our knees and pray. I think we should lay flat of our face and get just as low down as we can because that's where we are. We want revival. We need prayer. Prayer to God. We need purpose to follow God. What does it say next? It says, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. Prayer to God and purpose ourselves to follow God. We need to purpose that from now until the meeting starts, that we're going to follow God, that we're going to turn from our wicked ways, and that we're going to seek God's face, that we're going to stop worrying about who's playing football on Sunday and start worrying about how many verses we can read in our Bible, how many people we can ask to come to church, how many people we can invite to church. Hey, we'll do everything else, but we won't lift a finger for God, and then we say, well, God just don't save people the way He used to. We need to stop blaming God for our shortcomings. We need to stop expecting God to dump out revival on us as we are lukewarm, ungrateful, and unwilling to purpose in our heart to follow Him. That's not how revival works. Prayer to God, purpose to follow God, and only then do we see the power of God. Then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Not once in 2 Chronicles 7:14 does it say, according to what evangelists they get, or according to what singers come, or according to how many days of the meeting are. You want to know the sad thing it is? I'll tell you the sad thing. When you plan revival now, you have to plan it around football season, basketball season, soccer season, fishing season, hunting season. Why do you think we have revival in the dead middle of winter? Because that's when people might actually come. I want you to think about that. Why do you have revival? My dad said, boy, why are you having revival in the middle of winter? It might snow. I said, that's when people might actually show up. There ain't nothing else to do. That's the truth. That's how we pastors plan revivals. When can we do this that people might actually come? You know what I decided? Third week in January. It's cold. Ain't nothing happening. Super Bowl ain't for another couple weeks. Playoffs are already done. You're laughing. That's the truth. That's how I planned it. It's not a joke. That's how I planned it. I looked on the calendar and said, when are there fewer distractions that people might actually give a hoot and a holler about coming to God's house? That's how we plan it. That's the truth. Now I want you to think about that, and then I want you to think about the real reasons we don't have revival. When a pastor won't dare to say we're going to have 2 weeks of revival. Man, they used to do that. They said, we're going to have revival. It's going to start January 1st, and it's going to go to January 25th. You know who'd show up? Pastor, his family, and a few other faithful members. I mean, that's the truth. They used to have it for 2 weeks at a time. They didn't look to see what youth football league was going on. They didn't look to see what NFL season was going on. They didn't look to. They just said, we're going to have revival, and people showed up. Can't do that anymore. It's a different age. Then we wonder why we have no revival. We're going to look at all these things over the next 7 weeks. 7 weeks. 3 days, 15 hours, 20 minutes, 57 seconds. From the kickoff of a meeting that may or may not be revival. Will we look back a year from now and say, man, that was a really good meeting? Or will we look back a year from now and revival has never? There was 2 pieces of paper when you came in. One of them was my outline. The other one is something for you to fill out. Top 5 things you want to see from this revival. Top 5. If you can't think of 5, just give me your top 3. You ain't going to have to bring it back, and you ain't going to have to read it out loud, but you are going to have to do something with it, so you better hang on to it. Top 5 things you want to see. And God help you if you put on there, can't wait to hear Indian Creek Choir sing. I love Indian Creek Choir. I can't wait for them to be here. But I'll tell you what, that ain't even my top 100 things I want to see from revival. I can go over and hear them sing anytime I want. Top 5 things you want. It could be things you want personally. That might help. It could be things you want to see corporately for our church. I say if you're going to pray and you're going to dream and you're going to ask of God, ask big, it could be things you want to see happen in our nation. You mean to think that we could have a revival here in Gallipolis, Ferry, West Virginia that would stretch across the nation? If you don't, that's a problem. That's a problem. If you don't know that most revivals started with 1 or 2 Christians praying. Top 5 things you want to see. Write them down. Think about them. Don't write down what you think I want you to write down. Write down what you truly want from revival. Top 5 things. That's for you. But next week, I'm going to tell you what to do with those top 5 things. This week, I want you to really think, what are the top 5 things I want to see? Listen to this, and we'll close. Psalms 85 and verse 6. Wilt thou not revive us again? Listen, that thy people may rejoice in thee. Show us thy mercy, O Lord, and grant us thy salvation. When do we stop asking God to show up and do stuff for us? When did we stop? It's going to start back with that list of 5 things. This week, I really want you to do it. I really want you to pray about it. I really want you to think about it. I'd like for everyone to bow their head and close their eyes. Mr. Nell, can you come and play something soft for us? Listen, I understand this ain't typical Wednesday night preaching. But I really don't want to be just a typical church anymore. Do you? Listen, the world's filled with typical churches. Typical Christians doing typical things. I want to be untypical. Is that a word, untypical? I want to be extraordinary. I want to be an extraordinary church. I want to be an extraordinary Christian. I want to do extraordinary things. I want to do extraordinary things for God. It starts with prayer. Remember that. Prayer of the saints. Prayer of God's people. Mr. Nell's going to play. The altar is open.